Good evening, and welcome to this special edition of the CNN Evening News. I'm your correspondent anchor, Caitlin Hammock. Tonight we turn our focus to the press conference that took place earlier today. The White House, House of Representatives, and Senate all spoke briefly on the imminent crisis in Syria and the financial, militaristic, and diplomatic plans that the U.S. government intends to take in conjunction with the United Nations. These plans are meant to alleviate the current hostile situation in Syria that has led nearly 800,000 Syrian people to flee and take refuge in neighboring nations. It was made clear by all parties that the United States would continue to support and aid the refugees that have been forced to flee their nation. The press secretary from the White House team, Meredith Kozakowski, reviewed the financial plan approved by the United States government to send an estimated $399 million to support those affected by the ongoing crisis.
This increased aid will provide life-saving medical care and supplies, funding for shelter construction, and critical support for water, sanitation, and hygiene projects to help those affected by the crisis in Syria. In addition, our new assistance will provide counseling and additional protection programs to help the most valuable, including women, children, and persons with disabilities and the elderly.
More than 50% of the current Syrian refugees in Lebanon are children, and this funding will ensure access to safe spaces for these children. The United States will also provide an estimated $8.7 million to Lebanese armed forces in order to protect and monitor the Lebanon borders. This brings the amount of aid to Syria to a total of nearly $1.4 billion since the crisis began. The White House went on to encourage other nations to monitor the situation and increase their contributions to the humanitarian efforts if possible. Ms. Kozakowski also reviewed the current plans set forth by the United Nations to honor Syria's request to become the 190th nation to join the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, or the OPCW for short.
The OPCW, Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, doesn't destroy weapons, but supervises the process conducted by national governments. The OPCW, which has about 125 inspectors, was established in 1997 when the Chemical Weapons Convention took effect, prohibiting the production or use of chemical arms.
This process will include a comprehensive inventory taken of all the chemical weapons in Syria by the 125 inspectors of the OPCW that will soon be followed by a plan to destroy the weapons that are found during the inspection. At the current time, though deadlines have been set, they will not be insisted upon or enforced, as was made clear in the speech made by Estelle Mitchell, the press secretary to the Senate.
On September 4th, the Foreign Relations Committee voted 10-7 in favor of a resolution which would allow the use of limited force against Syria. Fortunately, both parties were able to come together and work across party lines in order to deal with this critical matter. In this resolution, hostilities would be limited to 60 or 90 days.
This leaves many Americans wondering what the point of a 60-day plan of action is if there is no plan of action or consequence to be taken should Syria not comply. When confronted with these questions, diplomacy was the answer, with no real plan of consequences set in place. Unlike the House of Representatives' take on the situation, which was aiming for regaining credibility by following through with the President's initial call for military intervention, the Senate aimed to steer clear of a decision and support the role of complete diplomacy. This was vast contrast from the press secretary of the House, Erica Magnuson, whose team called for the responsibility on the part of the President to follow through with the promise of action in order to regain our credibility and remove any potential threat to our nation's security and bring Bashar al-Assad to justice. The White House team has made it clear that the United States will continue to work with the international community to ensure that all chemical weapons will be destroyed and that assistance will be provided to those who have been affected by the use of chemical weapons by the Syrian government in the most diplomatic way possible. Optimism was generally high in regards to working with the United Nations and other countries to put an end to the violence in Syria, and we will continue to watch the story develop in the coming weeks. Thank you for tuning in to this special report. See you next time.